Years ago, and unfortunately, gosh, almost 30 years ago, I played high school basketball. And I played in a little bitty town in the middle of nowhere. In fact, I graduated with 25 people, which is hard to believe. It's not a private school, it was a public school. And when I tell folks I graduated fifth in my class, they always seem impressed until I tell them out of how many people. So on our away games, we would always have to travel through Columbia, Tennessee to get back home. Now, Columbia is not the roaring metropolis back then that it is now. Uh, Back in the day, they had two restaurants that we could stop at, either McDonald's or Hardee's. And you better hope and pray that one of the other podunk schools, Culleoka, Santa Fe, yes, they pronounce it Santa Fe instead of Santa Fe. That's their deal, not mine. Didn't have to stop through at the same time you did, because if they got to McDonald's before you did, that meant you went to Hardee's. And hey, my friend, you did not want to go to Hardee's. Now, I am not anti Hardee's by any means, but back then it was a tough way to have to stop and eat. Why? Well, they had a bunch of different food. They were trying to be a little bit of everything to everybody. They didn't just have hamburgers and shakes, but they had roast beef sandwiches. They served chicken. You remember the California raisins, which were very popular, and then they had, of course, this amazing breakfast. Well, when you went into order, they weren't quite ready. They weren't prepared. They didn't have the food that you had ordered either pre-made, or they did have it pre-made and it was left over from lunch. It would take you uh, 30 minutes to get your food. We'd never get out of there in less than 2 hours, and nobody was ever happy. Trying to be all things to all people was really tough because it kind of meant that Hardee's was nothing to nobody, and we didn't want to stop there. When I'm looking for the small business owners that I work with, especially, let's start with their products or services, we've got to narrow those down a little bit. And before everybody gets carried away, I love the idea of being a kind of a renaissance person and having range, like the book Range from David Epstein, where you can try to do several different things. I like specialization for some things than others. I want you to be able to really broaden your horizons. But when you're offering products, your services, or what you're trying to represent for your business to everybody else, if you tell them 15 different things, they remember zero. Case in point, I worked with a handyman several years ago. Decent business, did about 500,000 a year. We looked at their P&L and they were a little bit frustrated because they wanted to grow the business, but they weren't sure in what direction. When you asked them what they could do, they just smiled and said, "Well, Charles, we're a handyman, we can do everything. We do home repair, we do a little landscaping, we'll do some electrical, some kitchen contracting, whatever it was." And the P&L kind of revealed that about half of what they were doing was restaurant maintenance. Restaurant maintenance, what does that mean? Well, we'll go into restaurants after hours and we'll keep their equipment running and fine tuned. We'll empty the grease traps and we'll do all this other stuff that you couldn't possibly understand, Charles, because he uses specialized equipment. Would you like to do more of that? Yeah. We just don't want to leave everything else off the table. So we tried a little experiment where they created some new marketing materials geared toward just that. And they took some of the handymen, turned them into quote unquote salespeople, beat down some restaurant doors, told them what they had to offer, and boom, they were headed in a new direction. They started narrowing down what they offer, and they got more business. Now, that doesn't mean you can't offer all of the other fun things that you have in your toolbox. Huh? See what I did there? But it does give you a chance to, you know, specialize in such a way that the customer knows you for a certain thing. Other business coaches that I've worked with before offer all the things under the sun with the idea that if they need leadership, teamwork, time management, sales training, disc, generational, this, that, or the other, I'm their person. Maybe. But if you kind of settle in on a couple of these things that you're really passionate about, that you enjoy, and as you get those customers, you can start adding a few of these other things that you do. This doesn't just mean for products or services, kind of doing this 80-20 rule, so to speak, where we narrow down the biggest bang for our buck works in when we set our goals, when we figure out what relationships we need to be spending more time on, and when we just do simple things like take care of our finances or our health and wellness. Otherwise, if you try to be all things to all people, you'll be stuck at Hardee's until midnight in Columbia, Tennessee in 19 oh wow mid 90s, we'll just say.